Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are here for session 5 of level 2 of the Berklee Music Education and Special Needs Study Group. Many of you have already been treated to the incredible teaching and facilitation and fount of knowledge that is Vicki Lariccia. As I said before, I can't introduce her without gushing over what a thrill it has been to know her and collaborate with her for so many years. And how fortunate I am to get to benefit from all the many contributions she makes to our programs. She teaches 2 courses in our graduate programs. She consults for our arts education programs. She's a member of our advisory board. And I'm really picky about teachers. And Vicki is one of the absolute best teachers I know. And even on Zoom, you will see for yourself. So we are looking at differentiated instruction 102 and behavior management 102. There will be some recap from the first sessions, but there also, if you're only seeing this session, you might benefit from watching the video of the first session for some grounding. So just putting that out there. I am going to turn it over to Vicki, and thank you so much for being here, Vicki.
Thank you so much for that introduction. All right. So for those of you that didn't see the level 1s earlier, also a special education teacher. I currently work with grades 7 and 8, and I work in a public school. And my learning center that I have has students with moderate disabilities, any moderate disability you can think of. And yeah, that's been there for 11 years. And before that, I was a paraprofessional for students with autism. And I'm also a self-taught musician. I don't have the classical formal training in music, but I'm able to bridge the world of special education and the world of music and music education together for you, I hope. So we're going to continue on with differentiated instruction 102. So I'm going to share my screen for that. My cat might make an appearance or two here and there. He's standing right next to me. Oh, here he comes. This is our tax. Okay. So what is differentiation and why is it critical? This is kind of the same. These are the same essential question that we had in 101, but we're just going to dive a little deeper and look at some examples. I anticipate that this session will be a little bit shorter. And if you're staying for behavior management 102, that might take a little bit longer. So we'll compensate that way. So we'll recap just the nuts and bolts of DI from the previous 101 lesson. We're going to look at some examples of differentiated instruction, some examples of how to provide extension opportunities. We're going to look at a video of DI in the music classroom. There really just aren't a lot of resources out there for music instruction. And then finally, we're going to take a Kahoot, which is fun, I hope. So, and at any point, if you have questions or want to make a comment, just use the chat. And I can also unmute you if you want to say something. Raise your hand and or put it in the chat that you want to say something. And I'm all about people talking because I am starting to lose my voice. Okay, so DI's principles that we talked about in 101 are that the teacher recognizes that all students are different and understands those differences and uses them to inform how the instruction will be for their class. So differences like interests, background knowledge, ability, socioeconomic status, the list is endless. Assessment and instruction go hand in hand. So, you're not just giving one end of unit assessment, you're giving a pre-assessment and then all these ongoing formative, very short assessments just to see and gather data on how students are doing with your unit. And then along the way, the teacher adjusts the content, the process, and product in response to the differences that students have, along with the assessments that you're giving them. All students need to participate, so the way that you differentiate will allow that to happen. Students are part of the learning, and teachers invite them to collaborate on that, which gives them independence, and they can self-reliance on their learning. And then ultimately, as a teacher, we all need to be flexible in that moment when maybe a student is struggling, and make an on-demand decision and adjust our practice to meet the needs and the differences of our students. So in 101, we talked about the 3 elements and the 4 characteristics of differentiation. So let's look at the process component, which is kind of the same as students working in a variety of patterns. I'm going to click on this link, which is going to bring us to slide 6. And what you're going to see is like the flow of a traditional classroom. And then on the following slide, I might have these numbers wrong, actually. Okay, I don't. The slide 5 has the traditional classroom flow that I grew up with. And then on slide 6, you're going to see how the process of a classroom is differentiated, and you'll see a variety of patterns. And I am going to ask some questions there, so we can use the chat, or I can unmute you. So like here, and this flow could be over the course of a few days of a unit. It doesn't have to be one day. And it's kind of not a specific subject area. This is meant to apply to like most gen ed classes. So in the traditional classroom or the non-differentiated classroom, the teacher introduces the unit or topic. The students read the assigned material. The teacher gives notes. The students work on an activity. Students practice at home. Class has a discussion. Teacher gives notes again. Students work on an activity again. Maybe students watch a video. Then there's another discussion. The students complete a project. They also take a test, and then they move on to the next topic. So here is an example of a flow of a unit that is differentiated. This comes from Carol Tomlinson's How to Differentiate book. So I'm not going to read all this. I want you to read it. And then in the chat, my question is, what terms are getting repeated, or what themes are getting repeated in this differentiated classroom, this process? So I'll just say that a second time. So in the chat, please share any key terms or themes that you're noticing a pattern with, or that are getting repeated on the slide. And I'll read them out loud as they come in. So someone says student choice. Yep. I just put the question in the chat. Another person says lots of review and teacher assessment. Appropriate. Someone says teacher provides materials and students investigate, teacher acts as a guide. Consistent assessment to find where students are at. For those of you that teach in a public school or like a classroom setting, when you get to when you do that final unit assessment, whatever that might be, does your like district or your school, or do you individually have a plan or a protocol for if a student really struggles with that end of unit assessment? Or do you just kind of like say, all right, well, they struggled and move on to the next unit? And please feel free to share in the chat, or I can unmute you. I'm gonna, oh, okay, someone responded. I need to be a little more patient with the typing in the chat. So someone says, that's a good question. In the arts, we really don't assess like that right now, but they do have 1 or 2 review days in some of the other scope and sequences. Someone else says, I feel like I shouldn't do it, but I tend to move on. I see kids for a half hour twice a week. Yeah, it's not a lot. And I feel like there's so much I want to cover. Yeah, I can see that, the urgency for that. Yeah, it's a tricky situation, right? So if you're doing all of the differentiated stuff here and you're catering to the differences and the individuality of the students and giving them the choices and, you know, facilitating instructions so that they're exploring their learning, and they still struggle on, you know, whatever that performance assessment is, you know, what time do you have to kind of support that student in whatever gaps that they have in knowledge? Someone says, okay, my school started this brand new grading program that I have kind of mixed feelings about. So the assessment is part of it, but students are given the opportunity to make revisions or to redo an assessment or to do a retake, but it's like a slightly different version of that end of unit assessment. But they're given like a second opportunity as long as they're like providing evidence that they practiced again. And it's like, it's just such an equity issue because it takes this extra time that A, teachers might not have, and B, the students might not have. So I have mixed feelings about it, but you know, I don't know if I know the answer to that question of what do? You just move on if a student didn't do well on that unit. It's very tricky. All right. Anything else? Any other themes that are emerging on this slide? Or repeated terms, key terms? See the word partner a couple times. Someone may have said that. Interests. Someone says, yep, interests. All right, so I'm gonna move on. Now, in terms of assessment or the product part of differentiation, this is a slide again from Carol Tomlinson's book that gives you steps on how to create an assessment or a product assignment. That's the same thing as an assessment. So take a look at these 7 steps. And my wondering for you is, how could this process for designing a product or a end of unit assessment work for you in your practice as a teacher? And how, another question, if you don't want to answer that, is how does this not work for you? And again, if you feel like it's easier, just say it out loud. I can I can unmute you. All right, someone's gonna talk. Yay! All right, I'm going to turn on this person's microphone. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about differentiated instruction in general, but just in looking to this, sometimes, especially with music, because you are working on a piece and students are singing, it's it's a little bit harder to differentiate, because giving kids choices during the actual process is much harder. You can give them a starting choice, like about what, as a group, what piece they'd like to study, and there can be steps of discussion amongst them about how they want to proceed with the piece. But once you're started, the choices for individual students becomes more difficult, I think.
Is that in terms of like the actual skill of singing?
Well, if you're working on singing, there's only so many choices within a piece that you're teaching your class that kids can have. I mean, obviously, when you have kids who are nonverbal, you can give them a choice to maybe add, or maybe not sing the words, but hum the melody, or use an instrument that might be part of that. But overall, if the skill you're teaching is singing, and you're teaching it to the group, you can't teach 5 different songs at once.
Right, right. Are there, forgive my ignorance because I don't know the standards, but are there other pieces of content that get taught alongside the skill of singing that song that gets decided on that could be differentiated?
Well, I think just in general, there's things that are easier to differentiate. One of the things that this year has been really good in my classroom is I've gotten a lot of resources. So I've been able to, for example, when we were playing xylophones the other day, some of the kids were able to use the xylophones. Some of them use the iPad as an instrument. Some of them were able to do a rhythm with body percussion. And so they had those different choices of different modes in which to participate in what we were doing.
Oh, great. Yeah, whatever content people are teaching, there might be limits to what you can do, for sure. I also wonder, and I'm thinking, excuse me, selfishly, of my own students who take chorus. I've had students in the chorus class whose reading, their decoding level, ability to decode words in reading, was very low. So you have like a 7th or 8th grader who can read at about a 1st grade level. Do you ever have any students like that?
Well, I work in a population that's highly second language learner.
Okay.
So when I do material, when I may give materials or I have materials for them to look at, I vary what the material looks like. So some I'll give them the music and the words, but I also will have just the words. And
Mhm.
then we also do
Yeah.
a lot of my turn, your turn. They're slightly younger kids, but
Mhm.
um, one of the nice things I think about music, especially with kids who are struggling with reading, is if you do a my turn, your turn, they're likely to start remembering it. And
Mhm.
so what's on the page gives them a hint rather than or an idea of where they are in the piece, but they don't actually have to read it word for
Right.
word. Like
Yeah,
I
it's like a reference sheet for them. I love
yeah.
that.
And the other thing that I sometimes do is I put colors or markers on the page.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and then I also have a student who is blind, and so I have braille, just the words.
Oh, wow.
Well,
So what can I ask you one more question and then
ab-
you can
absolutely.
tip out if you want. So what does a typical final assessment look like in a course class?
Well, I think
Or
it
is there
kind of
not a typical one?
yeah. Well, most of actually what I do is general music, and basically
Mhm.
um a lot of it, like if it were a chorus class, then there would be some sort of performance,
Right.
and the kids would be on a stage and so on and so forth. And there we do some. I do this year I didn't because of COVID, but other years I do an assembly for each grade, so they have that opportunity to be on stage.
Mhm.
But my day-to-day assessment is more I walk around and I listen to students and I mark, are they on pitch? Are they
Mhm.
participating? The other day we were working, I did a ukulele assessment and I took a video,
Mhm.
and then I went back and I looked more carefully at all their position and hands and took some notes for myself because um, having them play it over and over again so I can really look at each kid was probably more than they could handle. But if I videotape them, I can go look and see what I need to work on next time.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with like something, it's a performance, right? So it's over a span of time. You might miss some things. So that's a good idea to video it. So as for data purposes, so you can go back and really scrutinize how they did.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. I'm gonna, are you good? Are you all set or did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Oh, nope, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, I will turn off the mic. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to share here in terms of the steps that they take to design an assessment? And do any of these steps here resonate with you or not really? I'm gonna, if you're typing, keep typing. I'm gonna move on to the next slide. So here are just some examples. Some of these are not going to apply to a music or arts class, but of products that you could use to assess students. So I'm wondering, are there any that you have used before? Are there some here that you're like, oh, whoa, like I think I'm gonna do that for unit X? Um, that would really work for this student that I have that's really interested in poetry or acting. So someone wrote design or create a musical instrument. I feel like I saw a lot of that when we started pandemic teaching. Wasn't that like I feel like I saw like videos of teachers doing that, getting creative with home learning, remote learning. Someone said, I have had 8th graders create a game based on musical knowledge. They worked in groups, then shared games in the class. Great. Someone says, make a video. My middle schoolers love making like newscast videos for various subjects. Like they love the idea of having like a blue screen or a green screen in the back, and they're like interviewing people on topics, but they're showing that they understand the content through the newscast. And they're so technologically savvy, they just know how to do all of this. Like most students have that interest. But yeah, you know that that's going to be part of their final assessment. They generally are doing better with the content leading up to it. It's really fascinating. Okay, we've got a couple more things. Someone says, write a musical or play, make a video, do a puppet show, lead part of the class. Oh yeah, that's great. You've had middle schoolers create lessons and teach the class something. And that was like work that they were doing leading up to these presentations where they led part of a class. Someone says, I love the puppet show idea and lead the class. Give it a few more seconds for anyone that wants to share. Someone created a folder with different projects. So it sounds like there's some choice in there, which is part of differentiated instruction. All right, so we're gonna move on from products. So in terms of assessment, sorry, not assessment, in terms of process or assessment. So for students that you've assessed and they're like, this is a little bit like too easy for them, they need a bit of a challenge. They're already very independent with other aspects of the process. This is just an example of something you could do, which is an extension menu. And I'll show you some examples that former grad students have made in my class, but it's mostly for gifted and high achieving students in your class who work quickly and well, and they just need something to go deeper and to kind of stimulate that part of their mind. So let me show you what one looks like, and then I'm going to have you guys make some. And I'm wondering if people are able to share. I can change it so that people can share their screens if they need to. Or maybe you can email me your extension menu when we get to that. But so here's an example of an extension menu that someone made for a middle school band and orchestra, specifically working out of a method book. So whoever these students are, they're like going through whatever they need to do quickly. They know, oh, okay, I'll go to the extension menu, and then they can pick from this box. So I'll leave that up for a minute, and then I have one on the next slide as well. And then this one is for a high school guitar class. So what I'd like you to do now is thinking about your classes and your students that might need extensions. Create one. We're going to take like a few minutes to do this. Create a possible extension menu for those students that accelerate in your class. And then I'm wondering the best way, if you want to share it, I'll just give you my email and then I can share it on my screen once you email it to me. And I also have here that music menus do not exist on the internet. Like there's a lot of them for other content areas, but not for music, which is interesting. This might not apply to private lessons because if you're teaching a student individually, you're going at the pace that works for them and you're individually tailoring the lesson to that one specific student. But I mean, you could still have it as an option as part of your routine or your schedule for the day. Okay, so to be more clear, so we're going to take about 5 minutes to design extension menus. I'll leave an example of one up, and then I'm going to put my email in the chat. And if you want your extension menu shared, just email it to me. Does anyone have any questions on what we're doing right now? Okay, so I'll check back in 5 minutes, which is around like 1:38. And hopefully we get at least one to share, because it's cool to see what people are thinking for this kind of thing. And even if you have one that's not completely done, but partially done, that would be okay too. All right, I'm gonna mute. All right, I know that wasn't a long time. For those that are working on extension menus, how much more time do you think you need? Or are you comfortable sharing what you've done so far? Okay, someone's trying to share now. Check my email. Okay, a couple people are trying to email, no problem. Okay, so I have one that has come in. Let me open it up and I will show it on the screen. And if this person wants to speak about it, they can. And if not, they don't have to. Just a second. Okay. So this is Kayla. Do you want to speak about this or just have it shared? Okay, so yes, say yes. So let me. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So I have a current weird background. I am a assistant band director at a high school, and I'm also a special education para, and I've been in that role for 7 years.
Okay.
And so my whole life is about differentiation.
Great.
But not so much on the gifted side of things. So, in band rehearsals, our kids that need that deeper meaning tend to be a little more squirrely. So like I came up with like a designated listener. So, it's like, okay, Tuesday is your day and you're going to listen while we're rehearsing and you're going to give feedback to the band, to the ensemble of like what was really good, what needs improvement.
Ooh.
And that gives them a job while we're all rehearsing together. And those kids tend to be a little more cynical.
Yeah.
I feel like, if we're making them look for good things as well as areas of improvement, that kind of changes their viewpoint to a
Yeah,
little
I
less.
love that.
Yeah, that was the one that I really liked. And
I
next year
definitely-
I'll be teaching 4th through 6th grade general music, so it's going to be a total mind shift.
Yeah, yeah. We'll have these extension menus ready to go for those
Yep.
students that need that deeper dive, that more independence with their learning. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
We also have Karen. Let me see if that email came through. It did. Karen, I'm going to open up your extension menu. Do you want me to unmute you? Okay, she says sure, so just a second. So I'm going to that. Okay, Karen, you should be able to talk.
Okay, hi, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a super fun exercise, I just have to say. I really love this idea. I teach high school music, so I have choral, a chorus, piano class, and general music classes. So I made a choral extension for my chorus students, because I do have a lot of students in there that are high achievers. And particularly now that our concert is over and we still have to fill up another 4 weeks of chorus class, this could be a really great idea to fill in and give something different. And some of the things that I want them to work on, like sight reading skills and singing on their solfege syllables, which we don't get a chance to do all the time. I just thought would be good things that I could put in here. And then I'd been considering focusing on a composer, like maybe at the end of each year or whatever. This is my first year in this position in this particular school. And so I just thought I'd put that on here to have, somebody or a few kids researching the composer, and then maybe coming up with a list of questions, and then they can email the composer with the questions and share the answers, with the class or something like that. So yeah, something that's, they're still learning, but, another activity besides singing. So yeah.
That's great and super creative and exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. Thank you for bringing this
Yeah.
up. I never thought of something like this, and this is great. I don't really have students in the choral class that need differentiation on the other side.
Yeah. Sometimes it is not that way.
So, but it's really important, to think about this side as well, the gifted students and the students who are ready for more. So.
Oh, and it looks like someone is stealing some of your ideas.
Great, yay.
You inspired someone else. That's great. That's usually how this whole study group, it's a study group. You're working together, right? But it's
exactly. Yeah, and I stole the idea of the designated listener. I love that. That can add that in here. So
that's great. That's so great.
A great idea too. Yeah.
I'm glad because again, this is not my area. The music education specifically is not my area of expertise. So I tend to rely on you guys to kind of fill in those gaps for me. So I'm glad that happens. Anything else that you want to say before I?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm looking at the time and we have 15 minutes. So we're going to kind of breeze through a couple of things right now. I might skip some things too. Thanks to those that have shared their extension menus. So next I want to watch this video. This is a teacher named Ms. McKay, and she explains how she uses differentiated instruction in her band class. One thing I want to note for anyone who has sensory issues like myself, she has all these index cards on this wicker table. You can see in the image and she like slides these cards across the wicker, and it makes this sound that is just kind of piercing. So it's very loud compared to the other sounds. So just keep that in mind. And as we're watching, can you get out paper and pencil, or whatever you want to type on, to just take some notes on what DI strategy she mentions or she's using in her class, and what strategies she didn't include that we've talked about. So I'm gonna hit play, and then when we're done watching, we'll answer these questions.
Hello and welcome. This is Differentiated Instruction in the Modern Music Classroom. I'll be your teacher today.
Oops.
Instrumental music.
I keep muting it, sorry. 1 second, there. Oh, okay, technical difficulties, my apologies. All right, take 2.
I'll be your teacher today. I'm Allison McKay. I'm the Data Middle School Instrumental Music Instructor and your artist of the evening. First, I wanted to talk to you about getting to know your students. This is our student, and I found that getting to know them helps to let you know how to better instruct them. For example, a lot of my students are involved in the Boy Scouts. These students make really good leaders. I've also found that dancers and other performers are really good at practicing and learning their skills quickly, and they have the discipline to continue working, but sometimes they can't make it to the performance because they're doing other things. A lot of students are involved in sports, and they are also very dedicated. It's also really good to know which of your students have little students coming in behind them. This can distract them at home. It can make them frustrated that they're not getting the right amount of attention from their parents, but future trombone players, so keep them coming. The purpose of differentiating instruction is so that this student, along with all of these students, get the same amount of education in my classroom. What we want is to move our students across their zone of proximal development. Here is what the student can do unaided. That's without me, Miss McKay, as their teacher. Here's what the learner can do with guidance. That's where I come into play. Here, we're not there yet. We're focusing right here. We're going to move them up through what they can do unaided to what they can do with our help. Ways I like to do this in my classroom are to give my students options on their questions. These are the depth of knowledge questions. So I'll ask my student, what is the time signature of this piece? This is a level 1. If I want them to think a little bit more, I'll give them a level 2. What bow stroke would be best to achieve this accent? I can ask them something a little more deeper, like what do you think inspired the composer for this piece? Or if I want them to really look into the music, I'll ask them to create a program notes for our upcoming concert. This is like a research paper for our students. I found that grouping students the traditional way in our orchestra, like so, with a teacher up front, these dots are students, the teacher up front, the sections the way they are, I found it really hard to get to all my students, especially the basses right here in the back. When they're grouped like this in the traditional sense, they can only work with each other. But what I tried to do is put them in rows like this. So the basses are all together, but the cellos can hear them and the violins can hear them. And that leaves lots of room for Miss McKay to wander the rows here to fix this student's and this student's and this student's problems that they've been forming. We offer our students at Data Middle School options in what they want to perform. They're able to join the band class and the orchestra class. And this gets every personality type of student an option for how they want to learn music. Also, what's really important is to let the students know that they can be assessed in different ways as well. I like to listen to hear if the student is playing the right notes. This is an easy way to do an assessment in my classroom. Another way I like to assess is by giving them an exit slip. If they understand the content, they let me know. Sometimes, unfortunately, I have to give the student a test. And this can be either a playing test or a written test. And that is a nice assessment to hear whether he knows what he's talking about when he's playing his cello. I give my students practice cards, and I taught them a bunch of different ways to practice, and they tell me how much they practice each week. And my favorite one is the choose your adventure type of assessment, where they can do anything from showing me how they can play to conducting a piece to writing about the piece, and that's how they show me that they understand the material. Thank you very much for listening, and that's how I differentiate instruction in my classroom.
Okay. That was really quiet on my computer. I hope you guys could hear her talking. So now let's answer these questions. So what DI strategies does Ms. McKay mention in her video? You can type that in the chat, or I can unmute you and you can say it out loud. So we have redesigned seating chart, multiple assessment formats, depth of knowledge questions, so like the level 1, level 2, 3, and 4. Give students extensions. Relationship building, nice. Identifying student strengths. Understanding students' backgrounds. She also mentioned something about student choice, but I feel like that's what every school does. When students get to be in a certain grade, that they get to choose what instrument they want to play, which is a form of differentiation, but I feel like that's kind of built in to your building. I don't know. Rearranging the classroom. So let's go on to question number 2. What elements did she not mention, or what strategies did she not mention? So someone says adapting music for all playing levels. Yeah, it kind of seems like the assumption is that they're all playing at the same level. Most of the choices that she gave were for assessment, not day to day. Yeah, like in the instruction piece. Give you guys a few more seconds to, if there's any strategies you notice she didn't mention. All right, we will move on now. Skipping that. I might skip this slide. Okay, so this is our final thing. Hope you guys know Kahoot, because it's fun. But if you don't know, just listen carefully, because if it's new for you, it might be a little complicated. So Kahoot is a gamified website, and students love Kahoot. Most students love Kahoot. So you guys are gonna get to play it here, and all the questions are pretty straightforward DI questions, but you'll get the experience of playing Kahoot. So you want to use another device to be able to get to this website. So if you have a phone, or maybe like open up another tab. And I think that Kahoot kind of changed a little bit. So it used to be that you only saw the answers on your device and the question on the teacher's screen, which is here. But I believe this year it got changed so that you can see both the question and the answers on your screen. So it's possible you can just open up another tab, and that will work. I've only participated in Kahoots this year. I haven't actually given any, which is funny. So you want to go to this website, kahoot.it. And now I'm going to share a different screen that will give you a PIN number, and you're going to type that PIN number in. So just a moment. Of course it reset. Okay, one moment. And this has 9 questions total, just so you know. Okay, so come back to the Zoom and you'll see that I'm sharing my screen, and there's something called a game pin at the top with a number. If you're into QR codes, there's also a QR code, so you could use the camera on your phone and it will open up the website. And you can see people are joining. Oh, I thought I had it set to make a funny nickname for you. You can, as a teacher, you can set this so that it makes silly nicknames that are appropriate. So if you have students who are going to write inappropriate things, that's a really good feature. So sorry that I didn't have that set up. I thought I did. So, and I can see people are joining. So far, there's 7 people here. And there's the classic Kahoot music, which you can probably hear. Kids love the music. And you can change. Oh, wow. Some of these settings you have to pay for. Anyway, you can change the genre of the music. I like the 80s vibe version. Oops. All right, so we have 7 players, but I know there's more players on Zoom, so I want to give people a chance to get in. And this is entirely optional, so there's no pressure to play. But I don't want people to miss out who want to play. Give it another 15 seconds and then we will begin. It looks like if I start it, that you can join late. I think the game pin will always be displayed on my screen. All right, so I'm gonna hit start. I will read the questions out loud to you as well. So what does differentiated instruction recognize? So hopefully you can see the answers and the question on your screen. There's also a 20-second timer, but you can adjust the timer for your class to be up to 2 minutes, I think. And once all 10 answers are in, because there's 10 people that are playing, then what happens is you can see the number of people that got it right. So everybody got this right, great. Students vary in language, prior knowledge, and abilities. Some of these other options are outlandish. So I'm glad no one else selected that. I'm glad people didn't select those. And then after every question, there's this leaderboard thing. And the kids love this. They love getting competitive with this scoreboard. Okay, question 2. Which word best describes the content, activities, and assessments in a DI classroom? All right, great. Variety. Next. And so you can see Ben, who was down below, has now made it up to the top 5. Question 3. Which of the following is not an example of differentiated content? All right, yeah. Teacher ensures that all material is covered. That is not the goal of differentiation. One side note about Kahoot, the free version at least, there's only a certain number of character spaces in these answer options. So I had to abbreviate a few of these. So the yellow one, OPPS period, it stands for opportunities. I don't know if that was obvious. I probably should have said something about that, but you'll see there's like, sometimes there's abbreviations because I can't fit the whole thing in the multiple choices. All right. So Kayla is in the lead. Which of the following is a list of characteristics which can be differentiated? Yeah. So instruction, assessments, groupings, and exploration, those are the areas that we differentiate in our class. Karen has a streak with 4 correct answers in a row. Question 5, which of the following is not a classroom element that can be differentiated? All right. So content can be differentiated. This was a trick question. Sorry to fool those 2 people. All right. Number 6, when and how should I assess my students' understanding of the content? All right, yeah, throughout the unit, always assessing, and it's using a variety of assessment types. Question 7, what is one thing I can do if a student is struggling? Yeah, adjust my content, process, and products to meet her needs. Great. All right. 2 more questions. How is the process in which students learn differentiated? All right, yeah, variety of groupings and allow students to make choices. And last question. What happens if you only teach to one type of student? This is another trick question because they're all correct. Some students will not be engaged. Some students will exhibit behaviors, which we'll talk more about in our second class today. Some students may not be able to be successful, and some students might need to be pulled out of your class because it is not accessible. It's too hard. So, sorry if that stumped anyone. I had 2 trick questions on there. All right, so now we go to the podium. Oops, I keep messing with the volume. All right, Panther, then LB, then Kayla, and the runners up. Oh, I just missed them. There were people down there. All right, great. So then if you do this with your students, they can see the podium. And then every question was answered correctly by most players. You can see like data based on how everyone did. And then you can maybe get feedback. So if I click get feedback, you can answer that on your screen now if you haven't closed out. Yeah, someone wrote in the chat kind of privately to me, but I agree with this. As a slow reader, I feel disadvantaged. And so I am also a slow reader, which is why, at least with the questions, I try to read them out loud for students who either slow reader, processing speed. That's my one critique about Kahoot. It rewards students for going fast. So yeah, some students do feel a little like they're not going to make it to the top. But if you have a classroom of 25 students, there's, I don't know. Ultimately, I think it's one modality, which is gamification, and a lot of students get some fun out of it. Yeah, I wish there was a way to disable the timing as part of the score. Maybe there is. I don't know. But yeah, if that's not for you, then, or not for your students, don't do it in your classroom for sure. And there's like, you can put images and stuff on there too, which is pretty cool. So that might help differentiate the Kahoot a little bit. I think that's the end. Okay, so that's the end of differentiated instruction 102. So we're finishing early, which is fine. I'm gonna open it up for questions or comments or anything you want to share on. And then after that, we can exit and then come back for Behavior Management 102 for those that are joining us. So you can either raise your hand or put something in the chat, and I'll give you some wait time. So uncomfortable being alone on the Zoom. Yeah, any questions? I want to just make sure people have enough time to, you know, develop a question if they have one and then type it. Yes, so someone is asking if they can share their screen for another way to show student choice. So let me set that up.
So Vicki, you should be able to give those permissions if you go
Yeah.
to the participant list and ask and see Ronit's. I think you have to make Ronit a co-host to do that.
Or I can just say who can share and put, oh, only panelists, I see, okay.
So she's got to be a panelist.
Okay, hold on a moment. I can do this, I can do this.
Let me know if you need my help.
I got it, yeah. Okay, Ronit, I have promoted you to be a panelist. So you should be able to share, I think.
Okay.
So Roni is going to show us another way to provide choices to students.
I'm sorry, it said that only you can share.
I know what
But-
to do.
Make
got
her
it,
a
I got it.
co-host.
I can tell you, I can describe it.
Well, you can do it now. I just changed it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So what I want to show, this is for yoga. It's not for music, but it's on the same idea that you pick up, let's say 3 or 4 activities that the student can pick. I'm usually working with kids that cannot read. And actually it's preschoolers age. So this is like a spinning wheel. So they can either spin the wheel and pick the activities that it's fall on, or the other choice is to actually show, like they show me where the arrow can go. If that's a spinning wheel, the activities that they choose. If that makes sense.
It does. I love a spinning wheel. I love it.
So I
exciting.
know you're working with high schoolers or middle schoolers that probably have the ability to read, but I'm thinking from the point of view that someone that cannot read, so it's always with pictures, and that's what came to my mind.
This is a great example of student choice.
So
And there's
thank
so
you.
many options. Thank you. Yeah, and visual representation is multiple modalities, and images benefit everybody, either because language is still developing for the student, maybe that language is not their first language. Any student who has focus or attention issues, the images can kind of help them focus more, or processing language can be difficult for some students. So having an image paired with it is a great way to provide access. So thank you for sharing.
And I just want to share before I mute myself,
Mhm.
my daughter, she's a 17 high schooler, and she just told me she loved the spinning wheel, even that she's not, even that she can read, and she's, I don't like to call her neurotypical.
Oops, did we lose you? Oh, I think we lost Ronita. We might have lost you. You were talking about your daughter.
Let's see if I can figure out something technical. There doesn't seem to be. I don't know what it is.
Oh, I don't. Is she? Oh no, she's still on. Huh.
See if that helps.
Roni, are you there?
It might be a connectivity issue. Yeah, I think it's.
Oh, we
connectivity
lost her.
issue.
We lost her. Oh, that stinks.
But it looks
I
to me
feel
we
like
can
she
do-
was gonna go with something about UDL. Oh, Roni is back. But like her daughter doesn't seem to struggle with reading, so
Yes.
even pictures. Oh, go ahead.
No, Karen, you want to say?
Sure.
Here, she's with me here.
I think it's just a cool little thing that it'd be different because it's out of the ordinary, and like I feel like spinning wheels are kind of associated with like carnivals and like having fun. So it's just kind of
Oh, I can't hear them again. It cut out.
a way to like bring that fun aspect into.
Yeah. Oh, here we go.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I don't know where it cut off, but
Yeah, there's a fun aspect, like a carnival, and maybe it reminds students of
yeah,
those experiences.
I feel
Yeah.
like even if for high school, maybe not having the pictures to make it less printing, ink, but just that fun aspect of it's just a different, diverse way to do things that you might not think of.
Yeah, of course.
And thank you. I guess today I have a bad connection. I lost you also through the game. So I went from 5 to 8 and I felt very discouraged.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm just kidding. That's fine. But thank you for sharing. Thank you for letting me share.
Of course.
Thank you for your input and otherwise too. Thank you.
And thank you for sharing. I love when other people are sharing and it's not just me. So I think we're going to end and we will return back at 2:30 for Behavior Management 102. So I hope to see you there.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Vicki. Yes, we'll take a break and we'll be back for more.
And Rhoda, should I stay on the Zoom, but just shut off my mic? And
yeah, it's the same meeting. The whole afternoon is one meeting. So we should all stay in this meeting, just come back.
Sounds good. See you then. Hello. So it's 2:30. We're gonna finish up on Behavior Management 102. For those that were in session 101, we didn't fully get through all of the slides, which is fine because I have some recap for 102. And Artax, my cat, is joining me again at the start of all the sessions. He's so predictable. Come on. Okay, maybe not. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Oh, here he is. He always does this. Hope some of you are animal lovers out there. All right. Okay. So here is our agenda. We're just going to do some review, like I said, of managing behavior. And we're going to look at some data for students that are fictional, fictitious. And if we have time, you're going to create your own data sheet to take ABC data. Then we're going to watch a video of people acting as a teacher and students and practice taking data for an individual student. And we'll talk more, we'll finish up what we were talking about with consequences and behavior plans and interventions and accommodations. And then very importantly, at the end, we need to discuss the difference between how we treat emotional dysregulation and manage behaviors. And it's hard to spot the difference. So it's really important that we know that they're different and they're treated differently. Okay, so you have a student in your class that's exhibiting a challenging behavior. If you can do data, try. If not, keep all of this information in the back of your mind, or reach out to another colleague, like a behaviorist or special education teacher. So the first thing you want to do is take baseline data. And to repeat, that just means you take about 2 weeks of data if you can. I know that's really difficult as a specialist because you're only seeing students 1 or 2 times a week. But during this data collection process, you don't change anything about what you do. Your point of taking this data is to try to eventually determine the function of the behavior. So you're going to take data on the antecedent, which is what happened right before the behavior, which is B, and the consequence, which is what happens right after the behavior. And you're going to try to do that for a couple weeks if you can. And then step 2, once you've got enough data, you analyze it to try to determine the function of the behavior. So there's the 5 functions of behavior. There's escape from demand, attention seeking, access to something tangible, sensory, and physiological. So you analyze the antecedents and the consequences. You see if there's any patterns in antecedents and or consequences. Maybe you can pinpoint an underdeveloped skill and try to figure out, like, what is the student really trying to communicate to me? Because behavior is a form of communication. Then you would choose a consequence or maybe even an accommodation to support the student. So we started talking about behavior plans. We're going to talk a little more about reflection strategies. We're going to talk a little bit more about behavior contracts. And I did share with you this FAIR plan, which includes accommodations, interventions, and responses. If you weren't in the first session, I can share that with Dr. Bernard to share out with the slides that she shares with you. And then finally, maybe we need to make sure that whatever we choose for step 3 is effective. Because I definitely I've developed a plan, a behavior plan as a consequence to positively reinforce behavior. And after 2 or 3 weeks, it was not working. So you want to make sure you're tracking how the plan is going if the challenging behavior is decreasing and the appropriate expected behaviors are maintaining or increasing. So you got to give it a couple weeks though. You can't just abandon a plan if it doesn't work right away, because students need time to adjust and adapt to something new. Okay, so that's the review. Okay, so all of this stuff that I'm talking about comes from applied behavior analysis. So you can read this quote. I'll give you a minute or two so you can understand what is ABA. And we'll talk more about that on the next slide. Okay, so there's like 2 prongs of ABA with how I was trained. There's using ABA for learning or instruction, which is not what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to be talking about using ABA for behaviors. We don't have time to go into the list on the left of how you use ABA for learning, but you can think of all the stuff we're talking about in trying to maintain or increase a behavior as it applies to a skill or a concept. So there are certain strategies that reinforce these learning skills on the left. And these are the strategies on the left, excuse me. But again, we don't have time to go over that, but I just want you to see that there's 2 prongs and there's a bit of a difference. So when we're talking about ABA for behaviors, that includes the functions of behavior, the 5 functions, which we've talked about in 101. That also includes ABC, the antecedent, which leads to a behavior, which leads to a consequence. It includes this idea of taking baseline data to then inform the design of what your consequence is going to be, a behavior plan, accommodations, intervention strategies, response strategies. And it also includes that you implement that plan with consistency for at least a couple of weeks to make sure it's effective. And you take data on how it's going. So we have 2 fictitious students we're going to look at. The first one, this scenario is pretty scaffolded as a model, so you can see how it's done. And then the second one is more interactive. So I'm going to ask you to kind of participate in that either by using the chat or your voice. So we're going to look at some ABC data and analysis of any patterns in the data for this student Stan, who is in kindergarten. And this comes from the Behavior Code Companion book. Okay. Just gonna zoom in a bit. So, okay. I'm just trying to think about saving my voice. It's been a while of talking. But I think that I need to read this out loud. Okay. So this data, we have 3 data points here that you can see on the screen. And then on the next page, there's 3 more data points. So there's only 6 data points. I really don't want to read this out loud because I'm kind of losing my voice. I'm going to ask if other people can just read across on the rows, like someone reads this first row for October 6th, and then another person reads the second row, October 6th, 11/20. So if you would help me with that, we need 6 people, or you can read yourselves, or some people are raising their hands. So I'm gonna allow some people to talk that have raised their hands. So Layla, would you read the first row?
Okay, the date, time, and duration, it was on 10/6 at 9:55, and it lasted for 6 minutes. Miss Kelly tells the students that recess will be indoors today. It's raining. Then the behavior that happened was Stan screams and runs for Miss Kelly and hits her in the stomach repeatedly. Consequences, Miss Kelly physically escorts Stan into the small hallway for 4 minutes until he is calm.
Thank you so much. Okay. Next, is it Monice? I'm gonna turn on your microphone.
The second one is 10/6, 11:20, 1 minute. Mom's boyfriend moved out of the house last night. Miss Kelly gives the transition warning that choice time is over, 5 more minutes, and then we switch, she says, holding up 5 fingers. Stan screams and grabs the arm of the teaching assistant to his right and motions that he is going to bite her. Teacher assistant gets up and moves to the other side of the classroom.
Thank you. All right. Can someone read the third one? Karen.
This was on 10/6 at 2:20, and the behavior lasted for 7 minutes. Students are putting on their coats, and Stan is playing with a Lego in the dramatic play area. Miss Kelly says, "Stan, come on, it's time for the bus," and shows him the icon from his schedule. Stan screams no and ignores the demand. Miss Kelly repeats the statement, and he grabs the schedule, throws it, and then pinches his cheek and kicks the teacher. Stan is escorted to the hallway for 5 minutes and then has to be escorted to the bus by 2 adults.
Thank you. So you notice this is all happening on the same day. And if you decide to take data, it does not, for your own students, it does not need to be at this level of detail. I think just because this is a book, we don't have all the details about the situation, the data is very detailed for us. Okay, who would like to read the next data entry, which was October 7th? Thank you for reading. If you'd like to read, just raise your hand. If no one raises your hand, then you guys can just read this to yourselves. But I cannot read all of that. Oh, Layla.
Okay, on 10/7 at 9:30, lasted for 10 minutes. Stan reported he forgot to take his medicine in the morning. Ms. Kelly shows the class the visual schedule of literacy activities they need to accomplish She asks them to sit at their desks to begin literacy. Stan looks at the list of activities he needs to do. Then Stan yells and scratches the top of his hand, then runs for Mrs. Kelly, who is holding the schedule. She blocks his first 2 attempts, but then he succeeds in hitting her. The consequence is both teachers bring Stan to the hallway where he stays for 28 minutes.
Wowzers. Long time. Thank you. The next one, which is the same day. Karen.
10:07 at 1:42 until the end of the day. Stan asks to look at the book a peer is reading. The peer tells him to wait until she's done. Stan falls on the floor and screams. He starts pulling at his mouth. Miss Kelly goes over to comfort him and he continues to scream. Stan is escorted to the nurse and his mom is called.
And then there's one more data point. I'm guessing there was like a weekend in between, like the 8th, 9th, Saturday, Sunday, and then the 10th, which I'm guessing is a Monday. Someone read that last one? Kayla.
Stan gets in line to go home, but Miss Kelly tells him to sit back at his desk because the bus won't be there for another 10 minutes. Stan pushes past the teacher and waits in the hallway for the bus. Miss Kelly keeps the classroom door open so that she can watch him.
Oh, Stan, poor Stan. I'm glad that Stan had the ability that he had the skill to tell the teachers that he forgot to take his medicine. It's nice to know that going into the school day. So this analysis has been done for you, and I'm going to show it to you. And you can see the patterns here. Look, it's at the bottom of the screen. So if we look at all the antecedents, one time there was something new that happened. There was indoor recess. 3 antecedents included transitions, and 2 antecedents were when Stan was asked to wait. Not the most consistent patterns, but there's, maybe those transition times might have a pattern. But the consequences, all 6 data points involve some sort of removal from something. So removed to hallway, to the nurse's office, or the adult removes herself from Stan. And this all happens during recess, choice time, dismissal, literacy, and the peer asking for the book. So if we look at that data, what do you think the function of Stan's behavior might be if the consequences all kind of involve being removed from the classroom or the teacher? Why might Stan be having these challenging behaviors, screaming and hurting himself and trying to hurt others? And we have in the chat, work avoidance or escape from demand. Yeah, he wants to be removed from the class. Someone else says avoidance. Maybe a little bit of attention, which is another function. So let's see what the behavior code people said. So you guys can read this last paragraph here. You might see here, Stan successfully avoided or escaped demands by exhibiting these behaviors. So the function might, like you guys said, might be escape or avoidance. Have you guys read this before? Or is it just really obvious? But you can see with just those data points that there was a pattern that was really clear in this fictional example, of course. And sometimes it is really clear. So here's a question. I know we don't know this student and he's not real. Maybe he is. I'm not sure, but so if the student has these really intense behaviors, I'll come back up here, that involves scratching himself, running away, biting, hitting. And we know that the student is doing this because they're trying to avoid a situation or escape from a demand. Any idea what how we might change the consequence? It's not a black and white. There's no like right or wrong answer, but and you'll learn that you try things out and sometimes they just don't work. It's all like hypothesis. Someone says sensory object instead of leaving. Yeah, so you can stay in the classroom. Like what kind of sensory object are you thinking? But yeah, instead of leaving, this is that, for those that were in 101, I shared a slide. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Where the consequence becomes the antecedent, this one. So like removing, we're removing Stan from the situation because his behavior is so disruptive, but that's what he wants. So that then kind of feeds into that behavior and creates this cycle where that behavior those behaviors are all reinforced. We have a cool down space in the room. Yeah, so that way he can stay in the room. Someone says, give Stan a choice for a timed break, then returning to class and trying again. Yeah. And the sensory break, maybe something he can squeeze, like get his energy out instead of hitting someone else. Great. So we're all great. Oh, and sorry, I missed one. Maybe crayons to scribble on paper instead of scratching himself. Yeah, that might give him that same sensation. Someone says have instruments that he can use to get frustration out instead of getting it out on other people or himself. Great. So next we're going to look at more data, but you guys have to do the analyzing of it. This is a different pretend student. It's someone named Juanita who's in 5th grade. We have a hand. Kayla, I'm gonna. Oh, it looks like you still. I didn't take off the microphone, so you can talk.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't realize my hand was still up.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I should put the hand down.
Yeah.
Or disable the microphone. Yes. Okay. First, I think it like looked like it just popped up, so no problem at all. All right, so now we will open up Juanita's data, and I'd love for other people to help me read. Thanks to those that helped with Stan with the reading. And I'll zoom in. Okay. So who would like to read the first data point, which happens on December 2nd? All right, Moniz, I will turn on your mic. Thank you.
12 to 11:15 a.m. for 2 minutes. Juanita told her homeroom teacher that she didn't like the haircut her stepmom had given her. The activity was science. Mr. Truffle asks her to take her hood off, saying, "It's not," loudly, "it's not a choice." Juanita puts her middle finger up at Mr. Truffle. She is told to go to the office, which she does.
Thank you. Who would like to read the second data point on December 4th? All right, Layla.
Okay, on December the 4th at 12:30 for 4 minutes during math, Miss Nguyen breaks up the students into 5 groups to do a math project. Juanita says she isn't going to be in the stupid group and won't sit at the table with her assigned group. She is told to work with the group or to go see the counselor. She goes to see the counselor.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, who would like to read the third data point, which happened 7 days later on December 11th? I think there's only 6 on this one too. 6 data points. Okay, Karen.
This is on December 11th at 11:50 a.m. and lasting for 4 minutes. The activity is lunch. Juanita is told she can't go to the bathroom until a pair returns. One student is only allowed at a time. Juanita calls the lunch monitor a beast and goes to the bathroom anyway. The principal is called and meets Juanita in the hallway. The principal asks her to go to the office for the remainder of lunch.
Thank you. Oh, I guess there's 7, or was that? I can't keep it. No, there's 6. Oh gosh, my computer is not responding to me. Okay, so there's 3 more data points here. So who would like to read the 4th one, which is on December 18th? All right, we have Moniz.
Juanita's social worker reported that the police were called to her house over the weekend for a domestic disturbance. In English, Ms. Hernandez tells Juanita to edit the story she wrote the previous day. Juanita puts her head down and seems to be sleeping. Ms. Hernandez wakes her at the end of class.
And this lasted for 37 minutes. Thank you, Moniz. And there's 2 more. Next one is December 19th. Who would like to read that? All right, Ronit. I don't know if Ronit is talking, but we can't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, let's give it another try. The time is December 19 at 2 p.m. for 1 minute. Juanita's biological mother contacted Juanita the night before saying she would be in town for the holidays. The activity was English. Mrs. Hernandez says, "Good afternoon," when Juanita enters the classroom. Juanita mimics the teacher's "Good afternoon" and wiggles her hips. Students laugh. Miss Hernandez ignores her.
Thank you. And one more. All right, Karen, take it away.
11:19, 2:30 p.m., lasting for 4 minutes in the hallway after dismissal. A peer walks past Juanita while she's standing with 3 friends. Juanita tells the peer that she's a fat pig as she walks by. 3 peers standing with Juanita laugh.
Thank you. Okay, so those last 2 data points happened on the same day. So let me make this so you can see the whole thing, what is happening? 1 second. Okay, is that too small, or can you can see that okay? Can you read that on the screen? Yes, thank you, Karen. Okay, kind of small. I don't know what else to do because we kind of have to look at all of it. Let me try something like that. That's sort of, okay. That's probably the best we can do there. So now this is where we need to do some analysis to see if we see any patterns. So I'm going to go back to our slides. And on this next slide, you're going to help me enter some data here, or some analysis. Okay. So patterns and antecedents. So like Stan's data, they listed, this antecedent happened this many times, and this antecedent happened this many times. So let's go back to Juanita and see the antecedent column. I don't know if you can see my cursor is this middle-ish column here. So are there any patterns? And I would say a pattern is like 2 or more things, 2 or more times that something occurs. So we put it in the chat. Are there any patterns in the antecedents? And I can scroll a little bit. So Monique says teacher demand. So how many times is there a teacher demand? So let's see. So the first one, told to take off the hood, that's 1. The second one, the teacher breaks up the group students into groups to do a math project. That's a second demand. Third one, she's told she can't go to the bathroom. That's a demand. The fourth one is a demand because she has to edit her story. The fifth one isn't really a demand. It's just teacher was being nice. And the sixth one's not a demand. So it looks like there's 4 demands being placed in the antecedents. Is that right, Moniz? Yes, all right. So teacher demands times 4. All right. And someone says anytime she's being told a choice is not in her control, that's kind of like the demand, right? Because it's not really a choice. Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. Someone says task avoidance. Well, the antecedent isn't behavior. I'm wondering if person who wrote task avoidance is thinking about the behavior column. Okay, yes, they said yes. And then someone says that the last 2 are related to attention. That might be a function of the behavior, but what's happening in those last 2? Just the antecedents. So the Ms. Hernandez says good afternoon, and then a peer walks past Juanita while she's standing with the refund. So what do those 2 things have in common? The consequence might have an attention piece to it, but what do the antecedents have in common there? Yeah, like there's another person interacting. Exactly. Nice. All right. You guys are doing great with this. Anything else with antecedents that you noticed patterns in? All right. Next is setting events patterns. So setting events patterns are like, we call them distant antecedents, or something that happened earlier that day, or something that's kind of ongoing in the student's life. So we'll go back to our data. And the setting events, it looks like there's 3 setting events. So is there a pattern with the setting events? So someone says problems at home, mom is coming to visit. I might kind of lump, I like, someone said, so if there's problems at home, mom is coming to visit, situations out of her control, definitely. Home life disruption, I kind of like that. That kind of encompasses the three things. Like the first one, the first sitting event is about a haircut, but there's a stepmother and we don't know what that relationship is like. So that could be someone says home life is chaotic. So maybe there's some sort of like unpredictability at home. And then the second one is about a domestic disturbance. And then the third one, so I don't want to assume, but maybe Juanita's biological mother doesn't contact her much. So I kind of like the language home life is chaotic, or maybe chaotic and unpredictable. And all three of the setting events had that in common. Okay, next we're gonna look at time of day. So time of day would be on the left, and then activity is this third column here. So look at the time of day. Is there any pattern in the times of day or the classroom? Or the subject area she's in? Someone says closer to or after lunch. Yeah. So definitely not in the morning for sure. And all of them, right? All 6 are like close to or after lunch, mostly afternoon. Yep. Okay. So for time of day, close to or after lunch. My computer is not typing. What is happening? Okay, there we go. / afternoon times 6. And did you notice any patterns in the activity, which is the class in this column here, science, math, lunch, English, hallway? Maybe not. I guess there's 2 Englishes, but I don't know. I feel like I'd be okay with putting English as a pattern, but then there's also science, math, lunch, and hallway, which are kind of random. So I don't know. Maybe there's just not a pattern with the subject area. Okay. And then let's look at consequences. So some of you kind of already mentioned some consequence patterns. Ronit says mostly academics for back to the activity pattern. Yeah, that's true. 4 of them are in academics. Actually, that's good observation. So that was 4. Okay, now back to the consequence patterns. The consequence pattern, the consequence column is on the right. So what do you think? Well, someone wrote disrespect. So the behaviors might be disrespectful, but what's happening in the very last column, which is the consequence, which happens right after the behavior. What do those have in common? Someone says, sent to the office, threatened to go to the office. So 1 office at the top. So there's 2 times. That's okay. Don't worry. Someone says they were sorry for looking at the behavior. That's fine. There's 2 consequences that are related to going to the office. Okay. Yes. This person says actually going to another location, leaving the classroom. So that's 3. So there's, sorry, my brain's starting to scramble a bit here after doing this since this morning, but the first one, she leaves the classroom, she goes to the office. The second consequence, she goes to the counselor, so she leaves the classroom. The third consequence, she goes to the office. What about that fourth consequence? Oh, someone wrote it in the chat. Sleeping is another way to leave. So she's physically in the classroom, but consciously she has left the classroom because she fell asleep. So there's 4 times that she's left the classroom. Don't jump ahead to the function yet. I can see some people, they're excited to hypothesize. That's the next thing. So we have 4 times that she leaves the classroom. And what about those other 2 times? The 2 other consequences here. We have students laughing and 3 peers standing with wanting to laugh. That seems to have 2 things in common. Those consequences there. Yeah. She got attention from her peers. Okay. Now, looking at all of this, there might be 1 function, there might be 2, but knowing what we know, 4 times there was a teacher demand, 2 times there was an interaction. We know that her home life is chaotic and unpredictable. We know that all of these instances happened in the second half of the school day, either around lunch or after lunch. We know that 4 times she was permitted to leave the classroom. And even when she fell asleep, the teacher let her sleep, so she was permitted to sleep. We know that 2 times she got peer attention. So what do we think? So I see a couple people saying attention, and some people were saying task avoidance or escape from demand, same thing. So yeah, task avoidance and attention seeking. What do other people think? Do other people agree with task avoidance and attention seeking? So Moniz, yes, psychologically that might be what's going on, but sorry, I should say what you typed in the chat, control of situation. Yes, but we just want to look at the 5 functions of behavior. So they were escape from demand or task avoidance, it's the same thing, attention, access to tangible, sensory, and physiological. So it seems like people are in agreement that task avoidance and attention seeking might be the functions of Juanita's behaviors that we're seeing. Is her home life out of control? Possibly, and that's why she's behaving the way she is in school. Maybe. Someone says yes, but a chaotic home can cause a person to be too tired. Yeah, I can have, everyone can react differently to that. But ultimately, maybe she's trying to escape from the demand because of the chaos at home. But it's still escape from a demand. So next slide, which is also collaborative here. So what do? We have this information. We have that we think, our hypothesis is that Juanita is trying to escape from demands or avoid tasks. And at times she's seeking attention. And in fact, what's interesting in this is the seeking attention happened on the day that her mother contacted her about being home for the holidays. So that kind of shifted things a bit. So for time of day patterns, what interventions would you implement? So just as a reminder, our time of day patterns were that all of these behaviors are happening kind of in the second half of the day. So what's something we can do for her? Someone says, for near lunchtime events, I would check to see if she was eating lunch, if she needed money in her lunch account. Okay. Like, I'm trying to think of how to word that, like monitor. I I'm just gonna write what you have. Check to see that she is eating lunch. Make sure she has lunch money. Okay. Why might this, so it might be that she's not eating, and that might be like a physiological thing. But I don't know, like we kind of have to make some assumptions because we don't know the student. But why would the second half of the day be harder than the first half, given what we know about Juanita? Oh, interesting. Someone says she's finally awake. Or the opposite, she's getting tired and losing energy. And then someone else says, offering, okay, so offering a space. Oh, so like when he said offering a space with less people, so maybe lunchtime's kind of chaotic and if she has a quieter space to eat, that might help. I was thinking, and I'm not right by any means, it's just something that popped into my head, that maybe there's some anxiety about going home. And then that kind of feeds into her behaviors of wanting to kind of escape from demands. Oh yeah, someone just wrote it. She is starting to think about having to go back to her house. So either she's just like tired and spent from the first half of the day and that's why she's acting out, or she's like thinking about going home and that's not a good feeling for her. So what can we do for her? What are some interventions we could do for her if either of those is true? Someone says find alternate or flexible choices for her to make. Yeah, like differentiate instruction, right? Someone says suggest time with the school social worker to help her process the changes in her life. Yes. And then next is looking at her I can't talk. Antecedent patterns. Are there interventions we could put in place for her to prevent the unwanted behavior in the future? So our antecedent patterns were 4 times there was a teacher demand, 2 times someone was interacting with her. So is there something we can do with the teacher demands? I have a student like this. Yeah, offer more choices, someone wrote. Someone wrote, allow her to pick the group she wants to work with. That can be an example of a choice. Okay. I'm just going to move on because I am starting to fade a bit and I know my limits here. So for number 3, are there any check-ins that we could do with her? Someone had talked about the social worker, so that would be like sort of reporting information to a therapist, but are there like mandated reporter things that we could do? Are there things that we could do specifically at school? And someone had mentioned this, like the stuff at home is out of our control, it's out of her control. Are there things that we can do at school to support her? Someone had said like a small, I think a quieter space for lunch. So that would be kind of a change in setting. add that. I think someone said that. I hope I'm not making it up. That might help her relax a bit before leaving for the day. Someone says report to administration/social worker so that they can check in, maybe set up a recurring meeting time. Yeah. Someone says modify her schedule, maybe art or music class. And then someone says approaching the demand in a different way, make her feel like doing whatever it is a choice and not a demand. I'm going to put that in the antecedent one. Someone says, my current building has small groups set up with the social worker where the kids are grouped based on needs. They get to know that they aren't alone and they have support. Yeah, doesn't seem like Juanita has that, which is kind of crazy because if the police were called for a domestic dispute, she really needs some check-in time with the social worker. Yeah, someone says schools need to hire art and music therapists. I wish, oh my gosh, if we had that at my school, that would be wonderful. Some schools have it. We do not. So the last question about Juanita is, how will you change your responses? So if you're her teacher and you're interacting with her, how will you change your responses? So that's the consequence column. So in our, in these first four, the teachers were responding in a way that reinforces her behavior because they're letting her avoid the task. She's told to go to the office. Honestly, like if a student gives the middle finger, I don't know. I just feel like that is not worth going to the office for. And maybe I don't know. I just look at it as a form of communication, like something is going on and the student needs a check-in. And another teacher, I don't know if it's the same teacher, let's see. So this is math, Ms. Nguyen. She is told to work with, she gets the option to go see the counselor. So that's what the teacher gives her, that option. At lunch, someone calls the principal and the principal gives her the option to leave lunch. And in the time that she falls asleep, the teacher gives her the option to sleep. So how would we change those consequences so that we don't reinforce these behaviors? Middle finger, telling the group they're stupid, calling the lunch monitor a beast, falling asleep. We want those behaviors to decrease. Someone says, I would listen to her, offer her a choice, remind her that we're all here for her. Okay, got a few more things in the chat. Someone says, but you also don't to look like you approve of that behavior. Other students will try too. I see this in high school all the time. Okay, so yeah, that's another piece. Like if a student's giving the middle finger, you can't ignore it entirely, but the other students in the classroom need to see that that's not okay. So what would you do? I mean, in that situation where a student gives you the finger, we know that this, fair is not equal. This student wants to leave the classroom, and maybe you've sent them out of the classroom before, so they know like, oh, well, I can just get out of the classroom if I give the teacher the middle finger. So what would you do in that specific situation? And while we're thinking about that, someone says journal her feelings. I'm going to write option to write injure, but stay in class. And then someone says recognizing she is struggling, and then provide options that do not include removal. Nice. Okay. And then someone says, we have a system where we can give them a referral online and then they don't have to leave the room. Oh, that's cool. Like a referral to a counselor. They set up a scheduled time. The referral goes to admin and they deal with it. Yep. Yeah, I mean, sometimes if it's not an emergency and the student needs a check-in, they can wait, you know, so that way the consequence, which is what happens right after the behavior, isn't Juanita leaving the room right away. Like, yeah, you can get that check-in, you can leave when the person that's going to check in with you has time. If it's not an emergency, the student can wait. That way you're not reinforcing that behavior. Okay. Anything else anyone wants, and anything else people want to say about Juanita and any strategies we can use to support her, given what we know? And you're welcome to say something out loud in the mic or put it in the chat. While people are thinking on that, my take, just based on the data, and I'm making an assumption, is that the teachers don't really know Juanita that well, and they don't have a relationship with her, because I don't know, like I've had students that do this kind of stuff, and my compassion is just very extreme. Like her life sounds very difficult at home. I'm sure there's other things going on that aren't mentioned on the page, the data sheet, but to me, that child just needs some TLC and support, because she just wants to escape. Things are just too hard. So, you know, make the content accessible. Okay, someone says, going back to response to being given the middle finger. Thank you. I think I would say that it wasn't appropriate in front of the class, and then check in on her to see what is going on. Yep. Yeah. Sometimes I pull a student in the hallway very quickly, like, so it's more private, but then the kids can see that I'm doing that, but they don't hear what I'm saying. It, again, fair is not equal, it depends on the student. Someone says, what happens when she needs to stay in class, delaying the check-in, but she becomes more disruptive? So, I mean, the thing is, this isn't going to be a perfect science. So that's data to me, right? If keeping her in the class, she knows she has a check-in, but she becomes more disruptive, do what you can do in that moment to be as supportive as possible. Because remember, disruption, challenging behavior is a form of communication or an underdeveloped skill. Asking yourself, what is Juanita trying to tell me here? What is she trying to communicate with me? But, you know, reactively, you'd have to check in with the counselors or the administration and say, like, hey, look, like, we scheduled this check-in for later in the day, but Juanita her behavior was escalating, and I don't know what to do. So I hope that helps. But sometimes we don't know what to do in the moment. And I don't know. My general philosophy, which does not have to be yours, is when in doubt, just try to be as cool and calm as possible. Try to ignore what you can and like privately redirect when you can, and don't get sucked into a battle, because you can always address it later, like later in the day or the following day if you need to. Someone says, my favorite phrase that I use with kids is, quote, you can be upset, but you don't get to be mean. I say things like that too. It helps them to see how their behavior is also affecting others. Yeah, so like, I always say you can feel however you want to feel, but you don't get to treat people this way, or you don't get to behave that way. So same exact sentiment for sure. All right, so it's 3:30 almost, and we end at 4. I think let's take a short break, like a 5-minute break. So let's come back at 3:35. I'm going to preview what we're going to do when we come back. We're going to watch a video and see how some people take this ABC data of these amazing people acting as teacher and students. I say that sarcastically. And then we're going to finish looking at behavior plans, reflection sheets, and contracts. And then we'll talk about differentiating between emotionally based behaviors that include anxiety and anger, and then oppositional behaviors. And then hopefully we will finish at 4. We're not leaving after 4. I know that for sure. And then someone says, I find that with students dealing with trauma, it takes time to earn their trust. Absolutely. So patience is huge, and trying to create as safe and predictable and consistent of a space as possible will help with that. Sending kids to the principal for a finger is just not a trusting, safe environment. It will be predictable and consistent though if you do it every time. All right, so let's resume at 3:35. I will see you then. One of the activities we would have done is to have you create your own data sheet on this slide. But we don't really have time for that. But in general, behavior ABC data sheets should include a column for date, a column for, whatever the activity is. Always going to be your class in this case. Time of day is important, setting events, and then you definitely want antecedent behavior consequence. So if you're old school and you like paper, you can just create a table like the ones we were looking at for Stan and Juanita, but you can also use a Google form, which I showed the 101 level people. If you like just, opening up your laptop and quickly entering in information, you can create drop-down menus like this or checkboxes so that you don't have to type anything and it's just a lot faster. Okay, so, and again, I recognize that taking data is probably going to be very difficult. That's okay, but it's good to know what the process is. So let's watch this video of these amazing actors. And you'll see how the person takes data. There is a point, and I always forget when it happens in the video, where it looks like the data taker is missing something, but then later she goes back and fills out another row of data. And I always jump to this conclusion, like, wait, what is she doing? This doesn't match with the behavior, but we just keep watching. My memory serves me right that it is correct. Okay, so we're just gonna watch that. So enjoy this amazing acting. And the purpose of this video is to train people to take data, so it's kind of perfect for our purposes. Make sure my volume is all the way up. Great.
Joseph is a 12-year-old boy with Asperger's and ADHD. He is mainstreamed in all classes except math. You were asked to perform an FBA to determine what is happening before and after the behavior started. You have already defined the behaviors and interviewed his teachers and parents. On this particular day, Joseph forgot to take his medication on the morning his first period teacher reported that he had a difficult morning in his science class. You are now scheduled to observe his English class to take ABC data. As you observe, there will be a prompter on the bottom right screen to model how to fill out your form during this observation.
And the lamplight over him streaming.
What time is it?
Joseph, don't talk out of turn, raise your hand. And the lamp. Yes, Joseph.
Can I go to the bathroom?
Not right now.
So the behavior marked is speaking out of turn. Now let's look at the antecedents. We marked demand situation, as the students are all under the implicit demand to be working at this time. We also marked teacher talking to the class, as she was speaking when Joseph asked, "What time is it?" As for the consequences, we marked verbal redirection, as the teacher redirected him to raise his hand rather than talk out of turn. And he was given social attention by the class, as many of them laughed at his behavior.
Page 853, we're going to answer those questions there about Joseph, sit down.
But,
Joseph, sit down now.
but I have to get the pencil.
Sit down. Open your book. Let's open it to 853. Yeah. Now get to work on these questions.
In this instance, the behavior was getting out of his seat. For the antecedent condition, we again marked demand situation and teacher talking to the class. There were multiple consequences, including verbal redirection. This came in the form of the teacher telling him to sit back down. Another consequence was the task being removed as he walked away from his desk. Thus, the task was no longer present. Third, social attention, as the class was looking at him and the teacher was speaking to him. And lastly, he was physically guided to comply, as the teacher prompted him back to his desk.
Yes?
I don't understand what the raven has to do with anything.
Well, the raven is a symbol, and it's a symbol of the sadness of the person that's speaking from the death.
My dog got shot once.
That's not appropriate, Joseph.
Here the behavior is speaking out of turn when Joseph said, "My dog got shot once." The antecedent conditions were again demand situation and another student receiving attention from the teacher when she asked for clarification. The consequences were verbal redirection when the teacher told him it was not appropriate to speak out, and social attention when the class all laughed at his comment. Let's finish Joseph's observation.
Do you understand? Joseph, what are you doing?
Happens all the time in my classroom.
Joseph, you need to stay seated. Get to work. Let's look at this first question. What is the speaker's mood at the beginning of the poem? Okay, let's look at the beginning. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. Does he sound happy or sad?
Okay, I can do it myself.
Okay.
Joseph, knock it off!
Shut up or I'll hit you. Joseph! That's it, Joseph. Go to the principal's office. Now!
Pay close attention to this last few seconds here. Did you see that facial expression that he made? So this is what I was talking about. See at the top, it says peer says knock it off. So they kind of skipped going over that line of data where he's getting out of his seat and dancing. But that consequence of the peer saying knock it off then becomes the antecedent of the second piece that happens, which is him going to the principal's office.
All right, I hope that was a good exercise for you. Practice makes perfect, and we still have Levi and Cameron's behaviors to figure out. This time we will stop to discuss only
Levi and Cameron, you have to pay for. The Joseph video is free. Okay. So, what do you think the function was, or functions, of Joseph's behavior? So the 5 functions are escape from demand, or you can call it work avoidance or avoidance, attention seeking, sensory, physiological, and access to tangible. Avoiding the task, someone says, and attention seeking. Attention, task avoidance, and attention. See, these are the most common ones, right? One argument that's been made when I show this video, which is up for debate, is that it's not actually attention seeking. All of it is work avoidance, because even though he's getting attention from the teacher and peers, it's still like wasting time and getting him out of doing a task. And it's not necessarily that he wants the attention, he just doesn't want to do the task. And the attention that he gets takes the place of the task, which is so interesting to me to think of it that way. Someone, yes, sensory seeking, erasing the board, dancing, chewing on the pencil, needing to pick up the pencil, like the pencil doesn't belong on the floor. Like that's I don't know, I feel like that's a sensory thing. The partially erased board felt very sensory to me. Also, this is just my philosophy. I don't care. Like, I don't care if a student does that, as long as they just sit right back down and continue with the task. If it is attention seeking, if this was an attention seeking behavior, which it could be, it's a fake scenario, just let the student erase the board. Don't call attention to it. Just if he sits down right away, then fine. But if you're getting hyped up or amped up because the student got out of a seat to erase the marker on the board, like, you might be feeding into him wanting to do that again. So you got to be very careful with your responses, especially when attention is involved. Okay, so we talked a little bit about behavior plans, like a token economy. I'm gonna try to breeze through this. So you can sometimes have like a full day plan where students get check marks or tokens or something, and they add up at the end of the week. That would be for a student who can handle that kind of thing, and they can see a week into the future and anticipate that. But some students, I don't know where the token economy one is. Oh, it's this one. They need to earn some sort of positive reinforcement or some sort of reward for the behavior we're expecting from them very frequently. So that's where the token economy might come into place. Someone in the chat says, back to the Joseph video, if sometimes you give positive feedback instead of negative, like, thanks, Joseph, for picking up the pencil, that can be effective. Yes. Again, it depends on why he's doing these behaviors, right? I mean, my general rule of thumb is like, try not to pay attention to some of that stuff, especially, I don't know, with students, some students with autism, it's the way that they're thinking about their world, it might be different from how people without autism think about it. And picking up a pencil, the pencil's out of place. That's not where it belongs. So why not, let them pick it up. Okay. So yeah, these other plans are kind of weekly plans, and you can see that the student earns a game. They get to play this card game at the end of the week. And the behavior is to complete expected work in your class. So this was a student who just wasn't doing their work when we knew that they could. We knew that they could, and it was a choice not to. So that was the escape from demand function. Yes, someone says pick your battles in the chat. Correct. Agreed. 100% on that. Okay, so the general idea of behavior plans is that you're tracking expected behavior in some form on some sort of chart, and after a certain number of tallies or whatever, tokens, the student earns some sort of reward. Reflection sheets, these are forms that students fill out outside of class time, where they reflect on the behavior and the choice that they made. So the behavior is called a choice, and they reflect on why they did that. What will they do next time that situation comes up, and how will they repair this, you know, they hurt someone's feelings, how they will repair. So this also comes from the Behavior Code Companion. Sometimes these don't work, so you're not going to know until you try. So, you know, this one just says inappropriate behavior. What did I do? So student has to take accountability. Sometimes you're sitting there and students like, I didn't do anything. And then that's a good opportunity to talk about what happened and just ask some scaffolding questions, or just say like, well, you're not going to leave until you write it down. So you gotta, it's your choice. Consequences of my actions. What effect did my behavior have on my learning and on the learning of others? You know, that's kind of a high level question. It requires a student to have empathy or theory of mind. So if a student doesn't have that yet, you don't want to give them this reflection sheet. Appropriate behavior, what I will do differently next time, what I should have done this time. And then people sign it. Here's another one. This is more scaffolded because I made multiple choice options for the student. So what choice did you make today? Why did I make, oh, I should have, pronouns don't match here. That's a little annoying. Change it down. Okay. Next time I feel this way, what will I do? So it, you know, it offers some options here. What are some strategies that don't work when I feel this way? And then what will I do to repair the relationship? Some options. Oh, this was for a student who just really struggled to see like the positive things in their day. So, you know, sometimes after school, we just meet up and talk about what was something that was positive today and what do you wish you did differently. So this is just more like reflecting on the day, not necessarily a behavior piece. Okay, and then maybe sometimes students need a little more scaffolding for reflection. So here, I think these are ones that are maybe for younger students, or students that struggle with reading and writing. My memory serves me, not that one. I'm just scrolling through with, you know, in the interest in time. This comes from Developmental Designs. Maybe I'm not going to get into what that is, but if you know about Responsive Classroom that uses morning meeting, developmental designs is for middle schoolers and high schoolers, but you can just take a look at. Here's an example reflection. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on your student. Next, we have contracts. So I have a student who uses a contract. We actually just got rid of it though. I'm not going to get into why, but because he was very destructive with his Chromebook. So he could earn his Chromebook. So his Chromebook was taken away. He could earn it back if he had 3 days of expected behavior. And we had this rubric with like 4 areas of behavior that we were expecting. And, you know, every day we actually did reflection at the end of every day, and we looked at the rubric, like how would you score yourself in each of these categories? And he needed 3 consecutive days to earn it back. And every once in a while he'd earn it back using this contract, but he'd only have it for a day because then he'd do something he wasn't supposed to do with it. And then, okay, I guess I am getting into the story. Sorry. Finally, he had it back for 3 days, and then he slammed it very hard on the floor, and it is completely demolished. So there is no more Chromebook. There is no more contract. Everything is paper-based. So a contract, I'm gonna, it's kind of like a promise, like any contract. Sometimes, let's look here. Sometimes I feel this way, and when that happens, I'm going to do X, Y, Z instead of doing ABC. And, you have the student sign it, you have other teachers sign it, sometimes you have the parents sign it. Oftentimes I have students write these with me, and they're sitting next to me, and we're like, all right, look, like, what is the goal? What should your behavior be like? How are you going to get there? What can I do to help you? And I type all their words into the contract, and then we all sign it. So I'm not really reading these to you, but you can read them. And again, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So I'm rushing for a reason, because I really do want to get into, oops, I have a slide that got skipped. This very last slide here, that you should know that these strategies will not work and are probably a bad choice for students who have an emotional disability, or students who have anxiety. So on the left-hand column, how do we treat emotions? You can't reward a student for not having an emotion. You can't reward a student for emoting the way we want them to. You can reward students for behaviors that they're choosing to make to escape from a demand, to get attention, to access something that they want to access, that are serving a sensory purpose or a physiological purpose. You can reward them for that. You can use interventions and response strategies for sure. And that's all the stuff we talked about on the right here. But on the left, if you think there's an emotional component, like maybe Juanita, we didn't really have a behavior plan when we kind of talked about her data. Yes, there was escape from demand. Yes, there was some attention seeking, but I don't know, underneath all of that, the strategies we came up with kind of came from the left side of the screen. So you always want to validate students' emotions. I totally, make them feel heard, that you understand them. Usually it's because a student is having an emotional response outwardly because they have not learned coping skills yet. Or maybe they have learned coping skills, but they just can't apply them in that moment because they're so dysregulated that they can't regulate their emotions in that moment. So it's not really on us to do the direct teaching of coping skills. Usually a counselor or a social worker or a therapist or a school psychologist is responsible for that, but they should be kind of communicating with the rest of the teachers on what those coping skills are that are being taught so we can reinforce them in the classroom. Hopefully they're getting therapy from the counselor, whatever counselor at school, and they're practicing ways to express their emotions that aren't destructive to themselves or others. Sometimes if there's a space where they can go to just sit with their emotions, sometimes that's the best bet. Just ride the wave and wait for the storm to pass. If that's an option, you'd have to talk to the counselor at your school. There's also something called social stories, which will be linked here when you get to look at these slides on your own. I love social stories. I wish I had more time to talk about what they are, but there's some examples there. And then zones of regulation, more for younger students, but you still use them at the middle school level. I'm just going to show you a visual and then I'm going to stop because it's 3:58. Stop presenting. So the links for the zones of regulation, my computer is very slow to respond. I'm dragging this, come on. Oh, you have spoken about social stories. Oh, I'm so glad that you spent a bunch of time on them. Okay. So maybe you've heard of the zones of regulation. Really great for kids who have large responses to small problems. So there's 4 zones: red, yellow, green, and blue. So, you know, once a student learns all about this, you can say, ooh, seems like you're in the yellow zone, you're kind of working your way up to the red, or, you know, they can start identifying what zone that they're in. And then the one that I use, the strategy I use the most with my students is something called the size of the problem. Oh, great. Someone on the chat knows about zones. So like many of these students who struggle with emotional regulation will react almost as though it's a 5 or a 4. And we'd say the 5 is the biggest problem ever. It's like the apocalypse. There's only 3 people left on Earth, or like a huge natural disaster has come through your town and your home was destroyed. Like really big problems. Your problem's like a level 1, like you left your homework at home, you know, like that's a level 1. You can feel how you want, but the reaction that's coming out it should be a level 1 reaction. So yeah, I tend to like the zones. Okay, so it's 4 o'clock. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, and we're really out of time. I don't want to make you stay to answer questions. So I think we've had lots of conversation all along the way.
Great.
So we'll get the video back so I can be seen. So I think we should thank Vicki for the incredible time that she spent with us today. So much information and so incredibly helpful, and so much practical stuff that you can immediately take and use. So Vicki, thank you for all the information and the resources. This is not our last time seeing Vicki. She will be with us next week when we are looking at projects, which will be very exciting.
Yeah.
So thank you all for your time and attention. We are going to send you off on your merry way.
Thank you, everybody.
Your day or evening, and thanks everyone. And there'll be Vicki, please send me your slides so I can get the slides out to people right away, and we'll be in touch. Thanks everybody.
Sounds good. Thank you. Bye.